In this lesson, we'll be talking about CSS selectors. If you want to follow along, open up relationalselectors.html from your working files folder. We're going to be using this file for a number of these videos, so feel free to follow along. First, I'll give you a quick tour of the sample HTML. This looks a little bit complicated, but it's not all that complicated, actually. Basically, we have a div with an ID of container and a class of container. Inside of it, we have a big UL. It has a class of great-grandparent. Each of these ULs and LIs also have their own special class, in this case, great-grandparent1. That's so we can target them individually for later exercises. The great-grandparent unordered list contains several list items. These are grandparent. There's another one down here. So each of these LIs contains two ULs called parent. And there's another one. And then each of these ULs contain a number of LIs called child. Now the reason they've been named great-grandparent, grandparent, parent, and child is to really hammer home when you have tags in an HTML document, you can really start to think of it like a family tree. This item is the child of this item, which is the child of this item. This item here is the sibling of this item, and this item, and this item. Just like brothers and sisters in a family. Finally, at the very bottom, there's another div with a class of links, and it has a UL with a bunch of LIs inside of it, and a number of links. Here's what our page looks like. You'll notice in the CSS, our great-grandparents have a background color of pink. Our grandparents have a background color of blue. Our parents have a background color of green, and our elements with a class of child have a background color of light gray. This way, it's easy to see everything visually. Also down here at the very bottom, we have this list of links. Now these first 5 links don't really go anywhere important. These last links go to Mozilla Developer Network pages. Those will be very handy later on when we're talking about attribute selectors and pseudo classes and pseudo elements. Now let's do a quick review of the CSS that we should already know with CSS2. First of all, we have tag selectors, like li. If I go down here where we're going to be typing our own custom styles, and I say li display none, that's going to tell the browser to hide every li. Sure enough, the only thing we have left is these great-grandparent elements. All of the other non-UL elements were actually inside of LIs, and here I've targeted every single li with this simple element selector. Now I'm going to get rid of the display none just because it's not very useful. I can also target elements by classes. If I say .container, it'll get every element that has a class of container. Lastly, I can target by ID. This will actually target the same element, this guy right here. Typically, CSS best practices tells us not to use IDs pretty much in any circumstance. They're very good for JavaScript, but not good for CSS, mainly because they mess up your specificity. This tag here has a specificity of 1 because it's a tag selector. Class selectors get a specificity of 10, and IDs get a specificity of 100. Because IDs are so heavy, when we use them, we mess up the specificity of all of our rules, forcing us to later on add IDs just to beef up our rules so that way they win over our previous rules. Using IDs tends to make us fight our previous selves when we're working on our code later on. So I might make a change, use an ID in my selector, and then 2 months down the road, I might have to override that change in a certain situation. I don't want to have to be forced to use an ID to make my selector heavy enough. Now also we can say .container li. That gets us every li that's inside of the container. When you space separate things, you're talking about every li that's anywhere inside of the container. Children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, doesn't matter. Now I'm not going to put anything inside of these selectors, but I'll just leave them right now for notes.